Hello, respected viewers. It's George from Ireland. So, welcome back to my channel once again. So, in this, I'm asking, could this weekend's attempted coup d'état by Yevgeny Prigozhin, the head of Wagner private military company, have succeeded? And the pundit consensus is no, it couldn't. We can't be absolutely certain it wouldn't have succeeded. I think the chance to succeed was going to be pretty low, like 10%. Because they were just outnumbered. Apart from anything else, they are outgunned. They had no air force. They did manage to shoot down 5 helicopters and 2 planes. So this was no play acting. I mean, even a cheap one, a cheap plane, military helicopter cost several $1 million. They claim to have accounted for 39 air crew. Even that's an exaggeration. It's maybe not as big an exaggeration as I thought. To begin with, I wasn't sure they'd shot down any aircraft at all, but Putin said that they did. Now, I don't trust a word Putin says. However, there are times when he's got no reason to lie about it. Why would you claim to have lost 7 aircraft if you'd lost none or fewer? If anything, he underreports his losses, doesn't exaggerate them. What good does it do? Does it do to state that people got killed when they didn't? And he said that some of them were killed. They weren't simply wounded or just simply had to bail out or something. Um, anyway, so there are rumors, and these are obviously published in the media, like the New York Times, that Prigozhin was negotiating with General Sergei Surovikin. He thought Surovikin would be on his side. Surovikin's an Air Force general, but sometimes commanded the army too. And Surovikin was going to join him. And had that happened, would there have been a serious chance? Well, obviously, if the Air Force didn't bomb Wagner Group, then maybe. But I'm not sure the Air Force managed to hit Wagner Group at all. As I pointed out, the Air Force, they lost 5 units in that brief fight. But now, why is this rumor out there? Maybe it's true, and Surovikin really was complicit, but changed his mind at the last minute. Or was this is simply a lie to besmirch him, to set the Russian top brass in deadly hate against each other, have him purged? He's one of the more effectual Russian commanders. Surovikin, his main contribution was convincing Putin to allow the Russians to withdraw from Kherson late last year. Had they not done so, up to 20,000 of them could have been forced to surrender. So I know in some ways, that's a disadvantage, retreating to the east bank of the river Dnieper. But that's not as bad as losing 20,000 troops. But having gone to the east of the Dnieper, they'll probably never get back west of it. But again, that's not as bad as losing 10% of their invasion force. And he's been demoted since. Now, remember that the Prigozhin has publicly lacerated Valerian Gerasimov and the defense minister Sergei Shoigu. He has actually publicly lauded Surovikin. So Surovikin might be an obvious choice to replace Shoigu. So I don't know whether that rumor is true or not. But if that was on his side, the Air Force not only not fly against Prigozhin's Wagner Group, but actually be on their side. Now that might have been a game changer. Remember, they stopped only about 200 kilometers from Moscow. So had this agreement not been reached at that time, had it been even 2 hours later, they would have reached Moscow. They would have been fighting the outskirts, not gone to the city center. I think resistance would have stiffened up. Now, the elite were gripped by blind panic, which is why some of them were chartering planes out of the country, or at least to remote regions of Russia. Putin himself is rumored to have fled. Now, I'm not certain about his whereabouts at the time, but I would bet my bottom kopeck that he got the hell out of Dodge. He's not a man who's got any physical or moral courage. Never gone anywhere near the front line. Yes, he has gone to illegally occupied regions of Ukraine, but stayed well back from the front line. And his visit only reported several days after he came home safe and sound. So, I mean, the thing is, the Wagner Group doesn't have much by way of artillery or indeed tanks. They were using those. And the Russian army has plenty of both. The trouble is almost all of that's in Ukraine. They try and rush this back to defend the capital, but the Russian army is notoriously slow. They wouldn't be able to get back in 2 hours, more like 2 days. The first of them would have come back. But Moscow is such an enormous city, 14 million people, the largest city in Russia, in Europe indeed. Now, Wagner Group's up about 25,000 fighters. About another 25,000 are now underground, especially after Bakhmut. And you just simply couldn't control a city of that size. Plus, there's the Russia Guard, there's the police, the Ministry of the Interior troops, some of whom are really outstanding. There's the Presidential Security Service. So there are various units. Even the FSB has got some fighting units. So I just don't see they could have succeeded. They could have given Putin a real headache. There would be some fighting on the edge of the city, but I don't think they could have taken over a city that large. If the public came out on the streets against them, that would have been something. Would the public have dared? It doesn't look like it. The public have been just conditioned to keep their heads down. Anyone who's brave is in prison already. And bear in mind that really on the streets, there is no anti-war movement at all. There've been no anti-war protests since last year. And you see the incredible leniency with which Prigozhin is going to be is dealt with, not given a single day in prison, whereas peaceful protests will get you several years in the clink. But Prigozhin's in Belarus now, that's finally confirmed, and his Wagner Group soldiers have been offered to sign contracts with the Russian army or to join their Supremo in exile in Belarus. And at least several hundred of them have gone. They've already been building camps there. But where's the money going to come from? Because Russia's confirmed they paid over $1 billion US dollars to Wagner Group since May 2022 up until May 2023. So not that much of it will be profit for Prigozhin, but it would have made a profit of a few $1 million anyway. But who's going to pay these people in the future? Belarus is a country of over 9 million people, poorer than Russia, is not actually fighting this war. They might still be induced to attack Ukraine from the north. Up until now, the Ukrainians weren't terribly concerned about being attacked from the north for the past few months because Russia's got virtually no forces in Belarus, not significant enough to really threaten northern Ukraine. They just don't have the logistics to transport enough troops, munitions, or anything like that. Would it be a good idea now for them to put in those whatever defenses in the north, which civilians can do, would dig anti-tank trenches? They need to be soldiers to lay mines, really, or to put barbed wire fences, things like that, dragon's teeth. Wagner Group remains a threat. It's probably going to be renamed and just taken off him. He might lose his property in Russia, but I think Prigozhin's days will not be long. He may well be poisoned. He might well be killed by the end of this year. But Putin can't really let him get away with this in the long term. Putin panicked. He caved in. Why did he not resolve it militarily? Because he doubted his ability to do so. He looks feeble. He is enfeebled by this. Since 1905, the 1905 revolution, there have been 9 attempts to overthrow the government in Russia. Only 2 of those ever succeeded. Both those were 1917. But in every other case, that regime eventually has fallen. The longest time between a failed coup d'etat and actually falling is 12 years. So Putin could survive some time and know that the future is not always conformable to the past. But Putin, having changed the constitution, allowed himself to seek election in 2024 and in 2030, carry on potentially to 2036, another 13 years. I don't think that's going to happen. Might stand out of the next election after all, which he might have wanted to do if he won this war. But I always said the way that we convince Putin to end this war is if you get him to believe that he stands a better chance of maintaining his power by ending the war rather than continuing it, he will do that. It's no good taking Bakhmut if you lose Moscow. So yeah, it's possible that some in the Russian army were negotiating with him. The Russian Air Force were going to come over to Prigozhin's side and didn't. But the claim is the FSB, Russia's internal spy agency. They rumbled a plot and it had to be preponed. It went off half shot 2 days earlier. No wonder Prigozhin was saying he didn't have enough ammunition. Probably true, he really didn't. But plus he's saving it to then use it in this attack. Some people are saying, well, those people of Rostov were demonstrating in favor of Prigozhin. Well, it'd be very dangerous to dissent against this absolute cutthroat with this band of desperados who are armed to the teeth. Another point is Rostov-na-Donu is a city of over 1 million people. There are roughly 100 people demonstrating for him. We shouldn't read too much significance into this. We've got no idea how representative that was. There'll be no opinion polls, and opinion is very much manufactured in Russia anyway. But what got me is the police standing idly by. But then again, if you're PC Plod with your handgun, what are you going to do against these battle-hardened thugs? So some of them, even though they've rushed through basic training, they have actually all seen combat, which makes them quite formidable. So, yeah, I mean, if all that had happened, if some army divisions, some of the Air Force come aside, then the chance would be rather higher than 10%. But that's why Putin's got the FSB spying on the army, the Air Force, because he doesn't entirely trust them, a polycratic regime. So that some of this tension between different armed services is deliberate to maximize Putin's paramountcy. Thank you for watching the channel. Goodbye.